A football is kicked into the air. The height of the football can be modeled by the equation h equals negative 16x squared plus 16x, where h is the height reached by the ball after x seconds. Find the values of x when h equals 0. So what this looks like is we have a football that is on the ground. It's being kicked up in the air and then it hits the ground again later. So this is going to have two spots where the height is 0. It's going to have the oops, it's going to have the height of 0 where the ball is kicked, and it's going to have the height of 0 where the ball lands. So I can tell without even really doing any math that one of the answers is going to be x equals 0 because the ball is going to be kicked at 0 seconds. So it's going to show up in the math, but we can tell without doing anything that 0 is going to be one of the answers. And so really the thing that we don't know is how many seconds does it take for the ball to land on the ground. Now this is not necessarily relevant to this question, but in this equation here, we start off with negative 16x squared, and you will see this negative 16x squared or negative 16t squared. That negative 16 in front of the variable squared shows up a lot when you're talking about an object going up and down, because that is the part of the equation that models gravity. That negative is the downward force that gravity has on an object. And so the 16 is the force at which the ball is being kicked up, and then the negative 16 is what gravity is doing, pulling it back down. So pretty much every problem on Earth that involves an object being launched up in the air or kicked or thrown or whatever starts off with that negative 16x squared. In any event, we want to know when h is going to be 0. So we're going to replace the h with 0 and then solve it just like this. So the x squared, that squared tells us that we're going to have two answers, which of course we know from our diagram that we're going to have two answers. And so if you got two answers and you get an x squared and an x, we know we have to solve it by factoring. And so as with any factoring problem, the first thing we look for in our polynomial is a greatest common factor. And the greatest common factor of 16x squared and 16x is 16x. And because this starts with a negative, we'll factor out a negative 16x. Let me change colors here. You could also, if you want to be real tricky, since this is an equation, you could divide everything by -1 so that you don't have to factor out a negative. That's a real tricky thing you can do since this is an equation so that you don't have to deal with negatives at all. But we'll just deal with the negative. We're pros here. So there we go. We've got x minus 1 on the inside and negative 16x on the outside, and it equals 0. And as we know, this is multiplication. Negative 16x times x minus 1 equals 0. Anytime you're multiplying things together and the product is 0, it means one or both of those two things are 0. So either negative 16x equals 0 or x minus 1 equals 0. And of course, one of these answers is 0, like we suspected. So we get x equals 0 as one of our answers. We knew x equals 0 was going to be our answer because the ball is on the ground when we kick it. So that one's not a surprise. The other one is the one we really want. How long is it going to take the ball to land? And it looks like the answer is 1. So 1 second. So the ball lands after 1 second. So those are our two answers, 0 and 1. It's on the ground when we kick it. It's up in the air and then comes back down and lands after 1 second. So it's probably not realistic. Like a physics person would yell at me for saying this, but we could say that it's at its highest point after half a second. And we can talk much later about why it's probably not realistic to say at exactly half a second it's at its highest point, why it might go up at a different speed than it goes down, but that's for another time. For now, close enough. Starts at 0 seconds, ends at 1 second.